You ever wonder if the things we do, our choices, just vanish into thin air? What if they don't? What if every single action leaves behind a permanent spiritual residue? Today, we're diving into this incredible idea from ancient mystical texts, the concept of a spiritual fossil record, not of bones, but of souls, literally etched into the fabric of reality itself. So get a load of this quote. It says, the wife of An ben Pelet comes back as Michal, the daughter of King Saul. The first one saved her husband, and then, lifetimes later, Michal saves her husband, David. This isn't just a fun fact. It's telling us that a core part of a soul's purpose, in this case saving a husband, is so powerful it just has to play out again. It begs the question, right? What is this spiritual stuff that's being carried over, and how in the world does that actually work? So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the echoes of ancient souls to see how this record is even carried in the first place. Then we'll get into the unseen spiritual stain that our actions can create. After that, we'll explore the mind-blowing idea of a cosmic hard drive that stores everything. And finally, we'll see how this whole system is really about fixing things, not just about judgment. All right, so first things first. Before we can even get into the idea of a spiritual fossil, we have to grasp the concept it's built on. And that's the Kabbalistic idea of Gilgul, or reincarnation. The core idea here is simple. A soul's journey isn't just a one-and-done deal. It's a process, a long-term project of refinement that happens over many, many lifetimes. This story is a perfect example of how this isn't just about getting a second chance, it's about a kind of cosmic accounting. You see, the ancient king Abimelech was told he was going to die because of the woman, meaning Sarah, who he took. Now, even though he was innocent in his intent, a spiritual debt was opened, and that debt didn't just go away, it stuck to his soul. Generations later, that same soul comes back as another guy named Abimelech, and guess how he dies? A woman drops a millstone on his head. The debt is finally settled, on account of a woman, exactly as the decree said. And this one really drives home the principle of measure for measure. It's so precise. Adoni-Bezek did this incredibly specific, cruel thing. So his soul returns in a new body, and what happens? He experiences a fate that's a direct mirror of his crime. His hands are cut off. The sources call this his tikkun, his rectification. You see? The action and its consequence are fundamentally linked at the soul level, completely outside of time and physical bodies. So, okay, it's pretty clear from these examples. Souls do not come back as blank slates. Not at all. They're carrying these echoes, these spiritual debts, and even patterns of behavior from one life into the next. Which leads us to the biggest question yet. If these echoes are real, what are they actually made of? What's the spiritual substance of this record? And this brings us to the next massive piece of the puzzle. The ancient texts don't talk about this residue as just some vague idea. They describe it as a tangible impurity, a kind of spiritual stain that can literally attach itself to a soul and to the world itself. The key term here, the one we absolutely need to know, is zohama. Now, this is not a metaphor for bad vibes or negative energy. The sources describe it as a real spiritual substance, a kind of cosmic filth that got injected into the system. It first entered creation way back with the serpent at the tree of knowledge. Now get this, the texts say this stain was actually cleansed from the world when the Torah was given at Mount Sinai. But then, the sin of the golden calf happened, and the zohama came rushing back and was, as the source says, absorbed into them. You really can't overstate how big of a deal this was. Before this impurity got a foothold, the world was in this state of perfect balance and purity. But after the golden calf, the texts say, the sullied spring was opened. It was a systemic failure. This spirit of impurity just spread through everything, mixing pure with impure and throwing the fundamental spiritual structures of reality into disorder. This zohama, this, is the raw material for the negative imprints our souls end up carrying. Okay, so we've figured out what this spiritual residue is, this zohama, and we've seen that it's carried across lifetimes through reincarnation, but that leaves the biggest, most obvious question on the table. Where does it all go? Where's the spiritual data actually being stored? Is there like a cosmic hard drive? And the incredible answer, according to these texts, is yes. Yes, there is. There is a system. A very specific, almost biological and computational mechanism for recording and preserving the spiritual history of every single soul. This is where we get into the really deep mechanics of this whole spiritual fossil record. Okay, so I want you to meet the lose bone. The texts describe this as a tiny, completely indestructible bone in our bodies. And they are serious about this. You can't burn it, you can't crush it, you can't dissolve it. It is eternal. And it has two jobs. First, it's the physical seed that the body will be resurrected from one day. And second, and this is the crucial part for us, it is the physical anchor point for the soul's permanent record.
The best way to think about the lose bone is like the spiritual black box from an airplane. It is the unchangeable, immutable audit trail for the soul's entire journey. The texts say it explicitly. For a righteous person, this bone feels pleasure after death. But for the wicked, it says, and their iniquities shall be upon their bones. The sins are literally imprinted onto this indestructible physical thing.
But wait, there's another layer to this, a related concept called hevil de garme, which means the vapor or breath of the bones. Think of this as a spiritual life force, almost like a moisture that's inside our bones. Now, while the lose bone itself can't be destroyed, certain sins can cause this spiritual moisture to just evaporate. The bones become dry, brittle, and that soul can't participate in the resurrection. So the storage drive is permanent, but the vitality of the data itself can get corrupted. So how does an action actually get converted into a permanent record on the lose bone? While the Kabbalistic sources describe it like a divine operating system that uses the divine attributes, the sephirot, here's the workflow. First, a person does something. Second, that action gets processed by the attribute of Gevura, which is all about judgment and severity. Gevura takes the action and basically crystallizes it, turning it into a hard piece of data. Finally, the attribute of Malchut, which is connected to the physical world, acts as the storage layer. It takes that crystallized data and imprints it onto the lose bone. And just like that, you've got a permanent, undeletable log entry. And the system even has this amazing color coding to help us visualize it. White represents hesed, kindness, purity, the soul's original default state. Red, on the other hand, represents gevura, judgment, severity, the stain of sin. So a negative act is basically a red event. It introduces the red of zohama into the soul's essential white, creating a permanent stain, a corrupted data file that gets saved forever. Okay, so we've got this incredibly detailed, permanent, and let's be honest, kind of scary system of cosmic record keeping. Actions get crystallized by judgment and stored forever on a bone that can't be destroyed. So why? Is the whole point just to have a perfect record for punishment? Well, the sources are really clear on this. That is not the ultimate goal at all. This entire system, from top to bottom, from the reincarnating soul to the cosmic hard drive, exists for one main reason, not to condemn, but to enable repair. The whole mechanism is designed to make tikkun, rectification, possible. That permanent record isn't there to haunt the soul forever. It's there to be a roadmap for the soul's journey of repair. It's a clear list of what needs to be fixed, often by giving the soul a chance to face a similar test and make a better choice this time around. So when you put it all together, the purpose of this spiritual record is huge. First, it creates total accountability. In this system, nothing ever just gets forgotten or swept under the rug. Every single action matters, permanently. Second, that accountability creates opportunity. By keeping the record, the system lets a soul come back and consciously fix the exact damage it caused. And that leads to the ultimate goal, purification. The whole journey through lifetimes is about cleansing that zohama, turning the stained red back to pure white. And finally, it all serves as a cosmic memory, making sure that no action, no choice, no life is ever, ever truly lost. And that really brings it all home for us right now. I mean, these are ancient, mystical concepts, but what they imply is incredibly personal. If this is how reality actually works, it means that with every choice we make, we are actively carving our own spiritual fossil. We are writing the eternal story of our soul right now. So the question it leaves us with is pretty profound. What story will yours tell? Thank you for joining us for this complete journey through the Pardes. We hope these ancient truths help you and your family improve your own dimensions this week. If you enjoyed this full chapter deep dive, please like, subscribe, and share. Which part of the journey touched your soul in the comments? We'll see you in the next chapter.